I want to read from this book what we have on the screen. Here she says, the great heart of the work is at blank, and the blank here is Battle Creek. That's when the General Conference was at Battle Creek. And as the human heart throws its living current of blood into all parts of the body, so does the management of this place. The headquarters of our church affect the whole body of believers. If the physical heart is healthy, the blood that is sent from it through the system is also healthy. But if this fountain is impure, the whole organism becomes diseased by the poisoning of the vital fluid. So what the prophet is saying here, if our physical hearts are pure, then as it pumps the pure blood through all our bodies, every organ in the body will benefit by the pure blood. However, if the heart is pumping bad blood, then all the organs in the body are going to suffer as a result of the bad blood. So then she says, the headquarters of our faith affects the whole church. Going back to the screen again now, let's continue. She says, if the heart of the work becomes corrupt, the whole church, we're on the left side of the graph, if the heart of the work becomes corrupt, the whole church in its various branches and interests scattered abroad over the face of the earth suffers in consequence. So here we have the headquarters right in the center now. We have the headquarters, which is the General Conference. Then we have division leaders, then union leaders, then conference leaders, then the local church and the pastors and departmental heads, and then the church board. Now she's saying if Satan can corrupt men at headquarters, then every other facet will suffer in consequence. The division leaders will be apostate all the way down. Are you with me, brothers and sisters? Let's make sure we understand. And she says Satan's chief work is at the headquarters of our faith. Going back to the screen, going back. Number one, she says, it is Satan's plan to weaken the faith of God's people in the testimony. So the first thing Satan wants to do is to weaken those at headquarters in the spirit of prophecy. Remember, Satan went to make war with those who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now, in a later session, we will actually talk about the spirit of prophecy and prove to you that this woman was a prophet. Let me put this in right now. If Ellen G. White was not a true prophet, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is not the true church, and Jesus Christ is not the Messiah. We will show you later on that Jesus as the Messiah, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the true church, and Ellen G. White is a true prophet. They either stand together or they fall together. You can't have one without the other. If Jesus is the true Messiah, then the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the true church, and Ellen G. White is a true prophet. If Ellen G. White is not a true prophet, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is not the true church, and Jesus also is not the Messiah. They stand together, brothers and sisters, and fall together. But here we see that the first thing Satan wants to do is to get us to give up our belief in the testimony. So the first thing Satan wants to do is get those in responsible position at headquarters to begin to slight the spirit of prophecy. Watch it, saints. What does he do next? Let's see what does he do next. Number two, next follow skepticism in regard to the vital points of our faith, the pillars of our position. Number three, then doubt as to the Holy Scriptures. Number four, and then the downward march to perdition. Continue, she says, when the testimonies which were once believed are doubted and given up, Satan knows the deceived ones will not stop at this, and he redoubles his efforts till he launches them into open rebellion, which becomes incurable and ends in destruction. Now, brothers and sisters, let's understand. Number one, it is Satan's plan to weaken the faith of God's people in the testimonies. Number two, next follows skepticism in regard to the vital points of our faith, the pillars of our position. Now, most people in the church today have not a clue of what the pillars of our position are. So, first, we have now a constituency of Seventh-day Adventists don't even know anything about any pillars. What pillars are you talking about? All right, number three. Then doubt as to the Holy Scriptures. Can you believe that we as Adventists would give up our belief in the Holy Scriptures? Hold on. Number four, and then doubt, and then the downward march to perdition. But let's go back to number one. Giving up belief in the testimonies. It is Satan's plan to weaken the faith of God's people in the testimonies. Let's look at this picture on the screen now. Here's a picture of Ellen G. White. Let's see what does she say herself. She says, Satan is constantly pressing in the spurious to lead away from the truth. The very last deception of Satan will be to make of none effect the testimony of the Spirit of God. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Satan will work ingeniously in different ways and through different agencies to unsell the confidence of God's remnant people in the true testimony. There will be a hatred kindled against the testimonies which is satanic. The workings of Satan will be to unsell the faith of the churches in them. For this reason, Satan cannot have so clear a track to bring in his deceptions and bind up souls in his delusions if the warnings and reproofs and counsels of the Spirit of God are heeded. Here we see, brothers and sisters, that the very last deception of Satan would be to make of none effect the testimony of the Spirit of God. In other words, the last thing Satan will do in his war upon God's church is to make of none effect the testimony of God's Spirit. You say, well Brother Mason, has this happened? Let's just take one incident. We're going to share a lot of incidents with you, but let's just take one incident. Just one incident. Let's go back to our screen. Here we see a graph, and it's talking about Ellen G. White, and it says, what would she say about? About what? The wedding ring. What would Ellen G. White say about the wedding ring? Well, let's see what would she say about the wedding ring. She says, not one penny should be spent for a circlet of gold to testify that we are married. Not one penny, she says, should be spent for a circlet of gold to testify that we are married. Now, why did Ellen G. White say that? Now, brothers and sisters, if we don't understand the sanctuary, we won't know why Ellen G. White said that. But today, saints, that's common among us. I have here a church manual of 1942. In this church manual, it speaks definitely against wedding bands and jewelry of any kind. But today, brothers and sisters, we are wearing wedding bands, we're wearing earrings, we're wearing necklaces, we're wearing bracelets, and all men, boys in our schools and what have you, in our churches are running around with earrings in their ears, brothers and sisters. But the prophet plainly tells us, not one penny should be spent for a circlet of gold to testify that we are married. Under no circumstances, brothers and sisters, should we bring people into this church with that stuff on. But if we don't understand the pillars of our faith, understand the sanctuary, then it means nothing to us. So there are many people that have been baptized into this church that see nothing whatsoever wrong with wearing jewelry because they've never been told. So they are tares by default. Are you with me, brothers and sisters? Let's continue. Going back to our screen. Here is a statement by J.L. Mahaney. Mahaney was president of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists from 1936, actually, until 1950. This particular statement is in October 14, 1937. He's speaking. I'm going to read what he's saying here. He says, I may tell you frankly, I have no desire this morning to preach you a model sermon. I do confess, my friends, to having a heart longing to see something come to us today that will change the whole drift of things. For I believe the time has come when there ought to be such a change. Remember, this is 1937. It is not the assault of our enemies that I fear. No, we can meet them with open Bibles and stand our ground in defense of the great fundamental truths of this message. But what I'm afraid of is our own departure from the true course. This is the hardest to deal with. Here, Ella Mahaney is saying, it is not our enemies, he says, that I'm afraid of. He says, we can take our Bibles and we can withstand any assault. He says, but it is from within, and the prophet tells us in Selected Messages, Book 1, that she tells us in Selected Messages, Book 1, she says, we have far more to fear from within than without. And Ella Mahaney, who is the president now of the General Conference, is saying, it is from within that I have the fear. Let's continue. Going back to our screen again. Now watch this, brothers and sisters. Remember, we are looking at Satan's war upon God's church and how insidious this war has been over the years. We're down at the very end of this war, and you and I need to recognize what's going on and what we need to do. We need to know, first of all, where we are, where we're going, what we should do, and how to do it. And this is critical. I cannot overemphasize how critical the times are. We are in a crisis, and if we are intending to be saved, saints, we're going to have to do something different from what we have been doing. Let's continue. Going back to our screen now, look at what J.L. Mahaney says now as we continue. Watch this. He says, would the pioneers know this movement today if they should awaken? Now, wait a minute. This is 1937. He's saying in 1937 that the pioneers would not even recognize the church. He says, would they recognize their movement today that they started in this world and handed over to their successors? Would they really recognize it? Oh, some would say they were a lot of old fogies. They were out of date. They were entirely behind the times. Today's standards have changed. That is a favorite expression with some, but I do not believe it. I maintain that every right and true and proper standard that has ever prevailed